Chapter 14. Well, here was a fine kettle of haddock all right. That bitch Sheila getting me into this. And that Jack London, taking it for granted that I would paint the posters. I didn't fancy not one little bit, of being in cahoots with the notorious J.J. Patterson. There I was, thinking I could break away from a respectable life, and here I am falling in with hippies, rebellious hippies at that. Yet the whole business sounded exciting. Now to tell you the truth, I couldn't care less about the state of local government, I couldn't think of one city councilor's name, even if the morning crossword depended on it. But I was all for livening up our city. Who knows, perhaps if we were victorious, Fidel himself would pay us a visit. He'd create quite a stir down the pub on Saturday night. I had to get out, my stomach groaned at me to feed it, but I was too excited and scared to make myself anything. I decided that I had to get out of the house before I went dollally. Putting on a coat, I tiptoed past Jack London's door and down to the front hall, where I could hear Mr. Marriott banging around in his kitchen. I slipped out the front door and, once out on the street, I ran. I felt so relieved to get away from that house that I thought I might never return. Not sure where I wanted to eat but anxious only to get a good distance away, I walked over Lendell Bridge into Museum Street, not running in case the police took me for a thief. I was only about 100 yards down the road when I heard a car door slam and a voice call, "Thanks again, good night." This was Bill Forbes. He crossed the road and came towards me. "Hello, is that you, babe?" said the voice. "Bill Forbes?" Well now, he was the judo champ when I was at university. To be honest, I hated anything to do with fighting. But him, he was a body with brains and looks. I used to watch him in the university library, I'd take a seat far enough away from him, so that I could watch him without him noticing me. He once said, about my artistic ambitions, "Babe, you're really good, I can't draw a straight line." From then on, whenever he saw me, he'd always say, "Hi there, Picasso," which would melt my boots from 40 paces. "Hello, Forbes," I said. Nobody ever called him Bill, it was always Forbes. "What are you doing over this way?" he asked me. "Nothing, shit." What could I say? "I'm looking for you, my knight in shining bleeding armor." So casually, I said, "Just strolling." "You look all out of breath, has someone been chasing you?" "Not really," I told him. "You sure?" "Yes, flaming Picasso." Couldn't I come up with something better than, yes and, not really? "This is my place," said Forbes. "Come inside and warm up a bit." This was more like it. Poor man, I could have ravished him on the spot, he looked so gorgeous. "I don't want to bother you," I sounded really pathetic. "Has anything happened? You look distressed." "No, I was just out for a brisk walk." I gazed straight at him. "I hear you're an artist now. Do you have a studio?" "Astound him, woman, come on. Is it near here?" "Not far, just by the Cap and Gown, number 38, the old house, it's got a skylight." "I'd like to see it." "Really, I would. You could show me your etchings." "I'd love to see a real-life artist's studio." I almost shouted, "When?" But before I could, a very attractive girl opened the door, wearing a dressing gown, with the initials TW on the pocket. "This is TW," said Forbes. "Do you two know each other?" No," I said. The girl looked me up and down before saying, "I don't want to know what she's doing here. I have no right to know at all." "We were both at university," Bill told her. "In the same team." "She was in the judo team?" "Yes, she looks as if she might have been." No, said Forbes. "The chess team, we used to play other university chess clubs." "Didn't we, babe?" I nodded. "Babe? That what they call you?" said TW. "Yes." I told her. Babe called to ask me for a copy of an old book she wanted to borrow. Forbes told her, "Must a minute, I'll get it." I was thankful for his improvisation, flattered that he'd bothered with one. What could he see in this woman of his? Well, apart from long blonde hair, blue eyes, and big tits? Was she really his steady, or was it just casual? Could he possibly be living with her? I stood there, feeling the strained atmosphere, whilst Bill was absent getting this hook. No, the silence wasn't golden, it was grey and grubby, just how I felt, standing next to this golden-haired Madonna. Then she had to tell me she had nothing on under her robe. I was just waiting for Bill to get home, you see, she said. I sheepishly grinned. I was still standing in the hallway, so what else could I do? Have you got someone at home, dear? TW said, or are you on the shelf, waiting for someone to take you down and give you a good dusting? She'd declared World War III. Attractive women never like me, why, I don't know. I'm no threat. Perhaps it's because I'm an artist, that makes them feel that their nice tits don't compensate for everything. Why should they have talent, as well as a 42-inch chest? Half a minute later Bill returned, carrying a book. He smiled and gave it to me. Thank you. See you then. I left, feeling I dipped into my lowest ebb. I stopped by a street lamp and looked at the book's title. It was called Thursday's Child, and on the flyleaf, a penciled circle around the word Thursday. I yelled yippee to the new moon. It didn't care. Chapter 15. Back in my room, Jack London and Forbes competed for my thoughts over the next few days. And did they cause different effects? Jack London sent shivers up my back and gave my stomach a queasy twinge. Thoughts of Forbes warmed my whole body so that even my palms and the soles of my feet perspired. On the one hand, I could look forward with apprehension to subversive activity, a brush with anarchy, a possible risking of reputation if not life. On the other, I could anticipate at least one evening with a man I had thought unreachable. Forbes wanted to see my garret, but what if the anarchists saw him? They might want to induct him. Or they might be angry with me for cavorting with a possible informer. It was a chance I didn't want to take. I had to keep Forbes away from my place. But without my garret, would I still be attractive to him? Why did he play the game with the book and not tell TW? Both situations smacked of intrigue, which made it difficult for me to sleep, or for that matter, sit still. I tried to get down to some serious work, but I kept getting up and lighting a cigarette that would burn away by itself in a saucer, or quietly going to the second floor to check my hair, or pouring myself a gin and tonic to somehow calm my nerves. I kept staring guiltily at the drawing board. Sometimes, I actually sat and picked up a pencil that never seemed to be sharp enough and I started to sketch something. My first attempt to draw Forbes's face from memory looked too much like Tarzan of the Apes, so I tried to design a poster. I printed anarchists all in block capitals, on another sheet, done in the style of the Superman comics. Corny, yes. I wasn't sure anarchist had an H in it. Did my destiny lay in the art world? I scrunched the paper up into a tight ball and fired it as hard as I could at the ghostly galleon tossing on a turbulent sea. The release of energy felt good. I paced the floor. At one point, I took my trophy out of the fridge and stared at it. I remembered my winning throw. With some extra practice, I might be great. I'd represent York in the All Pubs final and conquer the world. There I was in New York, defeating the American champ, amazing the sports writers with my coolness in every pressure-packed game, staggering to my hotel room afterward to be greeted, stripped, and anointed and ignited by a trio of film stars. I shuddered. Was I pursuing the wrong dream? No. I told myself emphatically, after all I'd been drawing since childhood, copying black and white engravings from my dad's collection of Punch. Hard as the first step seemed, the journey to artistic success could be completed if only you were dedicated and serious enough. The road was narrow and the ditches were strewn with people who only wanted to be artists but did not want to do the work of an artist. Resolving to get down to work as soon as I got back, I went out Monday afternoon to Annie's cafe. I was waited on by Annie herself, a pleasantly plump woman of about 40 with too much peroxide in her hair and too much powder on her face. With scarlet lipstick, she had turned a pair of narrow lips into a full Cupid's bow. After devouring a cheeseburger, I phoned the secretary of the Ladies' Darts League. "Linda," I said. "This is Babe." "Hello, Babe. That was a very flattering picture of you in the paper. Really got your good side." "Yes, it was all right. Hey, now, don't put on that modest bit with me, kid." Gloat, gloat, gloat. "Did you know that was the best score ever in our league? I was telling Terrence we'd better plan a night for you. You know, separate from the annual banquet. You deserve it. I thought perhaps we could all chip in a few pounds." "Oops. He told me not to tell you. When you see him, don't let on, you know, okay?" "Linda, that sounds terrific, but, oh, I know this is silly, but, I want to give up league darts." There was silence and then a tiny what. "It seems like the right time to retire," I said, slowly. "Retire while I'm on top. Lots of players do that. Have you been drinking? You can't just up and retire in mid-season when you played a perfect game. It isn't done. The association wouldn't like it at all." "Oh wait, I heard you and Brian were. I expect you feel bad about that." "It's not Brian. I just don't want to play anymore. I've played the best game possible and that takes all the fun out of it." "Babe, take a week to think about it. Look, I'll introduce you to my brother Dan, we'll welcome you back next week." I hesitated. Linda's brother might be worth meeting. One night at the pub, the girls were passing around a murky photo of Linda's brother posing by a motorbike with his top half naked. He wasn't very proportionate, but he might consider posing for an artist, especially one who had won a darts match practically on her own. "No, I don't think I would pursue that course." "Linda, my mind's made up," I said. "Sorry to leave you in the lurch, but that's the way it has to be." Once I'd got rid of her, I turned to leave the phone, but I saw Jack London coming around the counter from Annie's back room. Annie stood at the cash register in her pink smock and he waved to her. I noticed a light go out above the back room door. Not wanting to see Jack, I turned and hunched up close to the telephone and dropped in another coin. I dialed. My mum picked up the phone. "Hello. Hello, this is Babe." "Babe. Where are you? Are you all right?" "Fine. I'm fine. Are you eating? Do you need anything?" "I miss your cooking, Mum, but I'm okay." "No, I don't need anything. I'm living in a garret, doing my own housekeeping, and everything. I really enjoy it." "Your dad is at work, but you could call again when he's home." "You will, won't you?" "Maybe, Mum. I just wanted you to know I was okay." "Did you call Brian? He sat with me at Mass last Sunday. He's really a nice boy, Babe. He said he hadn't seen you since you moved." "No, well, it's all over between us." "Oh dear, Babe, don't." "Oh dear, Mum, it's all for the best, in this best of, etc., etc." "What's that supposed to mean, Babe?" "I don't know, Mum. I was tired." "Hey, Mum, did you see the picture of me in the local paper? 93 Mrs. Chapman next door told us about it." "You had a good game, didn't you?" "I did, yes." "Funny thing my mum said." "What is?" "A girl playing darts. We didn't bring you up to spend your life in pubs." "Don't blame yourself, Mum, it's an innocent enough pastime." "Yes, well said my mother. I don't know what we did wrong, really I don't. We tried, your father and I." She began to cry. "No, Mum, please, not tears. Remember what you used to tell me when I was a little girl and I cried. Those tears will run down your cheeks, and into your mouth, and you'll drown in salt water, remember." My mum started to laugh. "Yes, I remember, you were such a good little girl." "No, I wasn't. I was a horrible child. I used to encourage my baby brother to play with matches, hoping he'd burn to death. And I used to steal his food. I watched for signs of him starving, but he never did. I even put him in the dustbin once. Oh, babe, I'm glad you're my daughter, you do make me laugh. Yes mom, but sometimes I make myself bloody cry. Oh, I do miss you. Mom, is there any mail for me? 94 No love. Your dad and your brother want to visit you. We'd all like to see you. Couldn't we have your address? Not this week mom, maybe next. Are you keeping warm in this weather? Are you having your boiled egg in the morning? Are you having? I have to go now. Bye, mom I said. Goodbye, dear. God bless you. I put down the phone. Jack London walked into the hall. Calling home, eh? Even anarchists have mothers, I quipped. Suppose so. If you're getting lonely, you could always interview more models. He was leering into my left eye again. How's your Kathy? I asked him. She's not mine, I just see a lot of her. I'll remember that. Got any poster ideas to show me yet? No, I'll let you know when I do. Want me to come and get you started? He leered again. Then he pushed by me into my room. What could I have done? He was bigger than me. Up in my attic, he told me more about his travels back and forth across this England of ours, whilst I did a fast poster sketch for him, mainly to prove I could restore honesty to government, it said. We need catchier slogans than that woman. What about Che for truth, I asked him. I sketched as he continued talking. 95 better. Or in Che we trust, I suggested. He liked that one better. He said it would look really good with a drawing of his leader. I finished the poster sketch. Terrific. I'll take them with me. He took the slogan from me and left. I sat motionless, wondering and worrying about the life I was leading. I snapped out of my musing some minutes later when a puffing Mr. Marriott arrived at my door to collect the next week's rent. Chapter 16. When I was a little girl, I used to always be asking my mother, when will Christmas come? Is it here yet? Now here I was again, waiting for something. This is what artists do, I thought, wait for their lovers after painting masterpieces all day. But all I'd painted was Che lives and stuff like that. That would not mean much in the art world. Thursday evening, I walked through the snowy streets. The cold nipped at my ears, but I rubbed them with my coat lapels. I sprinted, not caring at all what policemen might think of a fleeting figure by the river. Running seemed to be the thing to do when you were going to see Bill Forbes. None of those forlorn high street people stopped me for a shilling or a match. I ran past them all. Funny, but I wasn't a bit winded as I dashed into the familiar garden and up to the front door. TW opened the door. Hello, I said. I'm Forbes is not home, said the girl. She looked skeptically at my untidy hair. Was he expecting you? I suddenly thought, perhaps Forbes hadn't put the circle round Thursday at all, maybe the book ploy was just a way of getting rid of me. I thought he was, I said. I felt pretty stupid for not making a phone call. I realized I hadn't telephoned because I was afraid he'd have second thoughts and turn me down. He's at chess practice, I think. Look, I'd ask you in, but, you see, at the moment I'm. Do you mind if I wait out here? I asked. It's cold. It's all right. I'll just sit on the step. He might not be long. Dear, I'm sorry about this. Perhaps I'd better get him to call you. I'll wait. I'm fine. Really? She looked worried when she closed the door. I heard the lock click. I suppose I did look like one of those derelicts, though I wore my best jumper under the coat. Where was Forbes? I hoped TW wouldn't call the police and ask them to collect me off the steps. Why had Forbes stood me up? I sat there until my teeth chattered, 10 minutes perhaps. I had started feeling sorry for myself when I caught sight of a figure wildly gesturing under a street lamp further down the road. A minute later, I realized that the person might be making signs at me. I didn't recognize Forbes at first because he wore a bulky duffel coat and a red golf cap. But it was him. "I thought you weren't going to recognize me," he smiled as I approached. He pulled me along out of sight of the house. "Where did you come from?" I asked. "I was at the chess club. I got off the bus further down." "I never expected." I know. It's just that I'm supposed to be going steady with TW, and she'd give me an earful. I knew you'd be here about the same time as the other night, so I tried to get here before you." "What did she say when you knocked?" "She looked scared. She said you were at chess practice." "I'm sorry for all the secretive stuff. I can't get over the fact that we both worked out the time to meet without consulting each another. Why don't we go into town, see a film? You said you were going to show me your studio." Not right now. It's nice to get out of there for a change. Let's go somewhere. You know I can't be seen with you, don't you? If we go into town, someone's bound to see us and report it to TW. This was an uppercut straight to the heart. "I could always lend you a balaclava to disguise yourself with," I said, grinning to show him it was meant to be a joke. He didn't laugh. "The main reason I said I'd see you was that I'm interested in your garret. I might be able to give you some decorating ideas." "Perhaps later, alright. I can't stay out forever," he said. "How about coffee at the Cardoma? Would anyone know you there?" "Oh, I'll take a chance. It should be okay on a Thursday." We laughed and talked on our way to the coffee shop. We had their poached eggs on toast with chips, dousing them in vinegar and salt. Forbes watched everyone who came in, concerned as he was about being recognized. At the same time he smiled and winked at me, as if he wanted to make the evening enjoyable even under the restricting circumstances. We discussed the years at university that we had in common. The glorious night of the New Year dance, when I was there with a chap that thought Charlton Heston was a wrestler. The year the football team won the University Cup. And the year our college appeared on University Challenge, and lost. The drama club production of As You Like It with Forbes as Orlando and me taking tickets all week, not being able to rip 6 tickets in half at once and having some wit say you ought to try phone books, and the end of term party in a wealthy undertaker's house where I couldn't take my eyes off Forbes. The time the engineering students went wild because Sam Wilburn, one of the college magazine writers, called them dead fish, and the way the editor and I spirited him off the grounds and hid him in a church basement until it had all blown over. We laughed about the 10 students stuffed in the telephone box. And that Christmas when we'd hoisted the red flag in place of the Union Jack. As we left the coffee shop and walked along Petergate, happily holding hands, we laughed about the Arts Club dance. I'd gone with a small bloke called David Mason, who kissed like an anteater. Forbes was there with a girl who later got a job as a researcher at the House of Commons. I'd got falling down drunk, and a few of us had left the Royal Hotel to go to another dance, carrying bottles of wine in our coats, yelling at each other across the dance floor, spilling booze on the chaps and their rented dinner jackets. I talked as if I'd been the holy terror of the girls' college. Meanwhile Forbes said nothing about where he'd gone with the prospective researcher, and I didn't want to know. "Then there were your cartoons in the Rag Week mag," Forbes said. "You knew I liked them, you said you did. Can't I come up to your studio, see your latest work?" "The fact is," I said, "I haven't done any." "I can't believe that. Come on." At this point I should have rendered my off-key version of Love for Sale, but I couldn't remember the words, so I kept quiet. "All right. Come on," I said. Now, his enthusiasm befuddled me. I wanted to go along with whatever he wanted to do. If he enjoyed himself, he might want to see me again. But I didn't want him to know anything about the rebels, and I didn't want them to meet him. A frosted-up car had to swerve to miss us as we crossed the street. We continued to talk, partly about Forbes's university courses, partly about my new career. I admire anyone who could break away from the status quo the way you have, he said. That gave me confidence as we approached the house. It's quaint, he said. Is it everything you want? Who does this house belong to, by the way? An old man. I just have the top room. I bet he's a lovely old gentleman. SSSSSSHH. He might be sleeping. You have to be that quiet. He's very strict about noise. I opened the front door slowly. It squeaked. Poking my head inside, I looked and listened for signs of Mr. Marriott or Jack London. I heard a radio start up somewhere in the house. It was the Four Aces. Mr. Sandman Forbes looked as if he might join in on the chorus. Please don't speak until we get upstairs, and then whisper, I whispered. I stopped suddenly, as one of the stairs squeaked. I listened. I feel like we're robbing the place, Forbes said with a smirk. We then tiptoed across the creaky floor. There was no trace of Mr. Marriott in his living room. Someone was in the bathroom when we went past. The sound of running water covered our footsteps. I could not relax until we stepped into my room, and then I didn't really relax when I thought of who was with me. I turned on the light. It's terrific, said Forbes, much too loudly. SSHHHHHHH. Sorry, but it's great. I never would have guessed you could find a skylight like that in the city. I'd add a drape over there, slap some gold paint on that wall, and build a drawing table under that arch. But it has possibilities. Where are all your drawings, by the way? I told you, I haven't done any. Why are you so nervous? This Marriott must rule with an iron hand around here. There's nothing much to see. Is it me that's bothering you, babe? I mean, the fact that I'm here. Perhaps. Well, don't let TW or anything bother you. I can take care of myself. You don't have to win marks for good behavior, you know. His blue eyes looked level at me. I melted, and tried not to show that my heart was pounding hard, but only partly out of fear. Would you like a drink? I asked him. Great, he said. He slipped out of his duffel coat and sat on the bed. I went to the fridge, sneaked the silver trophy out, and hid it behind the cornflakes. When I brought him a bottle of beer and a cup, he said, You must get on with your painting, you know, you must not waste time. Or time will waste me, eh? I know I have to do something that'll sell, or I'd better give up and become a street walker. We had half finished our beer, not saying much of anything, when I held my face up to be kissed. Forbes placed his drink on the lino-clad floor. Of course I had to go and kick his beer over. I pretended nothing had happened. Mind if I shut off the light, I whispered. You worried your landlord will walk across the roof and peek in? We both laughed, but I did turn out the light. We smoothly moved back into a sitting-up clinch. He moved his hand towards my bosom. I gently pushed it away, but didn't flinch. Eventually, it was necessary to break for air. I can't believe you're here, I said. I can't either, it beats the living room at my place for privacy. I kissed him again, and this time his hand went behind my neck and pressed as if he was trying to ease me down onto the bed. Look, Forbes, if you're really walking out with TW, then I don't understand any of this. I spoke mainly because we seemed to be progressing far too quickly and I needed time to get control of myself. I had the shakes. Wasn't I the too nice girl who lacked aggressiveness? 2 banks, an insurance company and a meat packing store couldn't be wrong. He laughed. Walking out? I haven't heard anyone use that expression since my old granny died. When he looked at me, his face bathed in milky gray moonlight, his dark eyebrows and his blue eyes were his most striking features. Well, I was a goner. You're right, he said, I shouldn't be here on the sly like this. He sat up, grazing my cheek with his lips. Wait, hey, I didn't mean. It's best I leave. TW will be looking for me. Let's mop up the beer first. I watched him go at the spilled beer with a towel. For the moment I was immobilized by anger for making him feel guilty. You just got here, I'll make some coffee or something. I do have to go, it's a good walk from here. If he left, I might never see him again. Would he kiss me goodnight? There had been crucial moments like this for me before. In a darkened doorway, a man would pause, hand on doorknob, about to disappear under my parents' surveillance. That pause was critical. To be grabbed, or not to be grabbed, that was the question. I watched him put on his coat and scarf. I picked mine up. You don't need to come with me, he said. I'd like to, we'll get a taxi. And waste money? No need. He turned toward the door. I didn't know whether I was invited to accompany him or expected to or what. I suddenly panicked at the thought that if he walked out of my garret I'd never see him again. Forbes thanked me with thanks for the nice time. I reached out, driven on by the word nice, all my senses yelling at me to embrace him. All I managed to get was a handful of his scarf as he crossed to the door, buttoning up his duffel coat. The scarf came off. He turned to retrieve it. I thought pulling off boys' scarves was saved for the playground. I said something, I think it was wait, and his expression changed. He then kissed me so hard, he hurt my teeth. I had to prove that I might be nice, but I wasn't stupid. Feverishly, we clutched each other and, still kissing, I tried to unbutton his bulky toggles on his duffel coat. We teetered and nearly fell as we squeezed each other, and so I leaned back against the wall. I placed my mouth near his left ear and whispered his name, you know the way heroines in the films do. William, Bill, Forbes. I think he liked that because he said M or something, and he pulled my sweater out of my skirt, so that he could send his hands up onto my bare back, and I was embarrassed to be wearing a woolen vest, but he didn't seem to mind, and pulled that up too, and his hands were cold on my back at first, but they soon warmed up. Taking his lead, I reached up and kissed him again, our faces burning, our hands roving. My hand was shaking too much to master the amazing mechanism that held his duffel coat together. I-05 I have to go, said Bill. Not yet. I really do have to go. Will I see you again? Certainly. When? I was pushing my luck. I'll come over Friday night, 8:30. I'll work. I'll draw. I promise. Good, said Forbes. See you. With that he left. Chapter 17. One summer when I had just turned 17 and was visiting friends in Scotland, I met this young American student. We saw each other every day for a week. After one intense session with him, I hurried back to my bedroom, shut the door and dashed off a progress report to my friend Rosemary. My dearest friend and close companion, I wrote, I was very much into Jane Austen at this time. I now take up my pen to present you with the inducements and motives for my current state, which would most assuredly be diagnosed as an acceptable form of lightheadedness. The gods of puberty must themselves be rejoicing, for, this very night, your affectionate and humble servant has succeeded in having her boobs felt. I kept thinking about that letter as I tossed and turned in my bed after Forbes had gone. I was elated, ecstatic, euphoric, and frustrated, but I had no need to tell Rosemary or anyone else. I wanted to keep the evening's experience to myself. Perhaps that was how I hoped to preserve the dream, or perhaps it was just a sign of maturity. In the morning, my room seemed colder than usual, so I set about keeping warm by doing things. I did a few exercises, like running on the spot, beating my record of 4 minutes. I vigorously dusted everything with a pair of dirty tights. I cleaned the rings on my stove and washed out the kitchenette with a face cloth. When the mood struck me, I sat down to draw Forbes. Where the day before, my mind had been filled with Jack London, Forbes, Sheila, Forbes, Jack London. Forbes. Mother, Dad, it now burst with, Forbes. I doodled with his face by the hour, forgetting meals. I drank the occasional gin and tonic. I didn't go out, and I didn't see anyone, not even Jack London. I couldn't sit still long enough to do a decent drawing. I was oblivious of all sounds and activity elsewhere. I was brimming with Forbes. By Friday I needed a meal. I went out and had spaghetti, chips, bread and butter, and 3 cups of tea. Returning to the house, I treated myself to a leisurely soak. I was halfway through my bath hit parade, when I remembered where I was, and then I didn't give a tinker's damn. I was bubbling over with anticipation. I sprayed scent down my bosom. I don't know why I bothered really. Back then, mine were a bit like 2 poached eggs. Forbes arrived shortly before 8:30, carrying a few books, and a small case. I smiled at him. How did you get in? Front door was open. Did anyone see you? Yes, I knocked on all the doors. What's in the case? A few props. I came here out of sheer vanity. I'm going to pose for you. He went over to my table to look at what I'd done. You are talented, that's a perfect likeness of Marion Brando. Come on, I said, helping him take his coat off. That's supposed to be you. Really? Actually it's more like Tarzan of the Apes. He flitted around the room, throwing himself into artistic poses. He tilted his head, flexed his muscles. I have to tell you, babe, your place isn't as dingy as I expected. I cleaned it up. I thought it might be crawling with cockroaches or something. There aren't any cockroaches. Too frightened of the rats? No. Really? Just a joke. Forbes seemed to be making himself at home. He seemed carefree and happy. I tried to be the same, a carefree, nonchalant artist. Sweeping the eraser crumbs off my table with the little hand brush I'd brought from my mother's, I took a fresh piece of paper and taped it to the drawing board. While I did that, Forbes produced a portable radio and found a station playing Lighter Shade of Pale. Let's dance, he said. The idea of dancing in the garret jarred me, but how could I refuse? I slipped easily into his arms and he had no trouble guiding me around the room using Arthur Murray's easy dance steps. The smell of his hair filled my nostrils and made me want to kiss him, but it was too early for that. I'd better get on with some drawing, I said when the music ended and the weather announcer relieved the disc jockey with news of gales and storms off Malin Head. Is Tarzan the only one you've done all week? Forbes asked. Yes, I needed you to inspire me. You're worse at getting down to your work than I am. At least I started my Atom BB essay last night. He bounced on the bed a few times and then settled down on a chair where he riffled through The Catcher in the Rye and read a passage. It sounded wonderful. He had such a gorgeous voice, he'd have made a cattle auction sound like Shakespeare. How about a study of Man with Book? He asked, keeping his head tilted down toward the page. I can't see much of your face. Just try it. I worked for nearly half an hour, trying to concentrate on rendering a likeness of him. Whenever my mind slipped into thoughts like, that's your idol you've got posing for you, the man you drooled over in the university library, I made a stupid mistake. I feverishly worked on the folds of his clothes. It just wouldn't come out soft enough, the shadows were like black stripes. How's it coming? He asked without moving his head. I'm having trouble with your trousers. Funny, that's what TW said the last time we were parked in her car. I grimaced. Forbes, I said, erasing the pencil line I'd nervously dragged across the drawing that was pretty tasteless. Sorry, I'll be serious. I think you're taking too long with this first one. I thought you might knock off 6 or 7 fast sketches and gradually work on something major. Sorry I work so slowly, I said. Let's try something else. I've kept you in that pose too long. Go on, stretch all you want, and we'll start again. Just a minute, I'm going to make a change. You turn your back and get a fresh sheet of paper while I go into the kitchenette and make a quick change of costume. Great. He took his case and glided past me into the tiny kitchen area. I felt terrific, we were both in the best of spirits. As I tore off the first sketch and prepared for the next, I thought, what a far cry this is from Hancock and Miller's. This is really very good of you, to pose, I mean. Just then, I thought I heard a commotion downstairs, but I ignored it when Forbes returned to center stage, beneath the dangling light bulb. He was swathed in a blue and white bath towel, and wore red Indian makeup. I gasped at the sight and told him that he was everything I had ever imagined a model could be. "You look like a warrior," I said. "You could paint me as Hiawatha." He stepped forward confidently, like Geronimo walking into a peace parley. He stood by a chair, where the bare bulb caught him with the fewest shadows. I took the red crayon and ran it wildly across the paper, not knowing when to look at him and when to look at my work. I saw the towel begin to move, falling away from his hips. I looked at his face, it was fixed in a devilish smile. Slowly and artfully, he inched the towel down off his body. And now I was drawing and coloring without even looking at the paper, and my hands somehow separated from my head, and while my frantic fingers sprayed crazy strokes of red across the paper, my eyes stayed glued to Forbes, who was standing still, his only covering, the towel, in a pool at his feet. The door flew open. "Hello, babe," was all I heard from Jack London as he barged into the room, with Sheila and at least 3 others coming up behind. I think I yelled. "What have we here? What have we here?" Jack asked. 111, good God, someone said. Well, I think that was Sheila. I dropped my pencils and at last remembered the meeting. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was exactly 10 o'clock. "You could at least have knocked," I said, weakly. Sheila was enjoying Forbes's attempts to get the towel up around himself. Jack London was laughing and pointing from me to Forbes. 2 of the others were grinning lecherously. At that moment I was only vaguely aware of the dark, long-haired man standing in the doorway. I knew it must be J.J. Patterson, but in all the confusion, I had to ignore him. "I thought you'd abandoned the idea of a model," Jack London said. "Can we get on with the meeting?" one of the others said. "Babe," Forbes cried, "who are these people?" He stood in a corner clutching the towel tied around him. He looked angry. "They are, members of the University Arts Society." Sheila said, "It was very wrong of Babe not to tell you about our meeting here tonight. But don't worry, you can strut around naked all you like, we're all oblivious to such things." They looked about as oblivious as the front row hecklers at a wrestling match, but I had to go along with her. "She's right, Forbes," I said. "I forgot we had this meeting here tonight. I'm sorry we have to interrupt the sitting, we'll continue tomorrow." "I'm staying until this meeting is over," said Forbes. "Impossible," said Jack London. "What we have to discuss tonight does not concern models. We cannot risk having our artistic secrets leaking out to rival groups." "I wouldn't tell any." "I'm sorry, you'll have to leave," Jack insisted. "But," I said. "Well, good night, then," said Forbes. With his towel trailing behind him, he picked up his clothes and case and bolted from the room. The dark long-haired man had to step aside to let him go by. He went downstairs and I heard the bathroom door slam. So much for our beautiful friendship, I thought. Fear replaced mourning of my lost model when the dark man came inside and closed the door. Without speaking, 2 men moved the kitchen table out into the center of the room as the man, who was obviously J.J. Patterson, plopped a battered attaché case onto the bed. From the case he produced 2 candles in holders. He set them on the table and lit them. Jack London turned off the overhead bulb. The candles gave my garret a jaundiced underground atmosphere. "Men," said Jack London, "and women," said Sheila. "Yeah, women, we have a new and trusted member in our midst. She has agreed to do our all-important posters, which will soon decorate every telephone box and bare wall in the city. Let me first induct her into the group and we'll sort of get this great crazy meeting underway. Babe, step forward." A solemn hush fell over the room. I stepped forward, self-consciously. "Raise your right hand." "Right hand?" I asked. "That's it? Repeat after me. I hereby swear that I shall fight for freedom. I hereby swear that I shall fight for freedom. From waste, inefficiency, bureaucracy, and trivially, under the banner of Che Fidel Patterson, under the banner of Che, Fidel Patterson. And that, in my struggle for better city government. And that, in, my, oh, yeah, my struggle for better city government. I shall divulge none of the rebel plans. I shall divulge none of the rebel plans. And any blood I may spill will not spill in vain. And an what? You heard, but surely there won't be any bloodshed. Bound to be some bloodshed, babe, he said. Bloodless coups went out with William and Mary, bound to be some bloodshed. I don't like the sound of this, I said. The Lord Mayor isn't going to like it? Oh. Come on. Now, the people follow, we lead. Let's finish the pledge. Any blood I may spill will not be spilled in vain. All right. Any blood I may spill will not be spilled in vain. Congratulations, babe, you are now a fully fledged member of Rebels for Action. President Patterson, meet your newest recruit, Miss Babe, well, babe. I turned to face the man with the dark hair and the Zapata mustache. There was an aura of the 19th century about him. He wore a gray suit and a sloppily tied red bow tie. One eye stared at me, while the other was covered with a black eye patch. Below his mustache, his jaw and mouth were firmly set. I had seen his picture in the newspaper and I trembled to think that such a well-known villain was here under my skylight. We want the people of the city to be a free people, he said, seizing my hand. Let us help each other. A subdued cheer went up from the others. Jack London took me around, introducing me to each of them. The first was a young political science student in a leather jacket. His John Lennon glasses, hunched shoulders, wrinkled forehead, and Sherlock Holmes pipe made him look about 50 years old. Alex Sitwell had greasy black hair, red eyes, and large, ever-puckered lips that loosely held a half-smoked joint. Linus McGrellis was the third one I didn't know. He seemed bewildered by everything as he chewed on his nails. Friendly enough, he resembled a person who had stumbled into the wrong wedding reception and is asked to dance by the bride's mother. And then there was Sheila. Men, and, ladies, said Jack London, make yourselves at home while President Patterson sits for Babe. Babe, you can be sketching our leader while we proceed with the meeting. Sheila and two of the others sat on the floor, Brendan sat on the bed, and I took up my position behind the drawing table. The imposing J.J. Patterson sat on the model's chair. Jack London remained standing. The greatest night of our lives is coming up on Monday, Jack said. It's the night I went back and forth across this waterlogged country to end up here for. Monday night the city council will be ours. People in this city are like people everywhere, they don't go to council meetings. There'll be no spectators, perhaps one or two policemen, but, let me tell you, we'll have enough men. And women, said Sheila. Yeah, all right Sheila, enough men, and women, to surprise them, and before the army arrive to interfere, we'll be the new city council. Next stop Parliament. Wouldn't it be less dangerous for you to run for the council and get elected? I blurted out as I started Che Fidel's outline. Voting is outdated, babe, said Sheila. That's correct, said Jack London. Political coups are the thing today. You can tell by talking to housewives and teachers and even roller skating kids that they're fed up with the council. They want a change to younger men. I listened to all this, not sure what to think or say. I kept quiet. As Sheila said yesterday, we need new blood. I like to think of it that way. We take over quickly when the council least expects it, and the people will love us for it. We'll be heroes if we show them we are real, alive, and throbbing with new ideas. I thought this was the age of peace, love, and flowers. I said. That's all very well for others, but we need a preemptive strike, said Jack London. Do we? I said. We are all brothers, and what's it? Said J.L. Patterson. You see, babe, a coup d'etat is the best thing for this country. Shake it up a bit, said Jack London. Elvis Presley. Et. said Sheila. Going to shake it up, you know, Elvis. Linus then spoke. As Bob Dylan says, the times they are a-changing. And if you can't lend a hand, get out of the way, is that it? I said. Exactly, said Che Fidel. Bob Dylan can afford a revolution. He's a multi-millionaire, twice over, I said. You don't understand, babe. We can show the people that we're alive and throbbing with ideas, and we can change the worn-out old constitution, and we promise elections, well, very soon. We are all brothers and sisters, said J.J. Patterson. Jack London explained the strategy, which was painfully simple. Once our group has overwhelmed the authorities by sheer surprise, I will install J.J. as head of the new party, renamed the Che Fidel Yorkshire Commune. We will then announce spending on 85 new police cars and build a brand new police station and double police salaries. We'll enhance the police image by calling the new station Public Safety Building. With the police on our side, we'll then be able to imprison anyone who objects to our new policies. I've searched for the truth throughout this crazy world, and I've found it here, in the service of this great man, Jack said. Fidel Che, you will be made minister in charge of finances, Ward 2. As well as handling power, transport, industry, town planning and the dog pound. Sheila will handle public works, museums, libraries, and children's entertainments. We can sort out the rest later. You've forgotten refuse collection, said Sheila. Said Fidel. Dustbins, said Sheila. Though my hands shook. I finished drawing J.J. Patterson. They gathered around to inspect my work. His hair isn't that color, said Sheila. It's good, the others agreed. It's very, well, it's me, isn't it, said Fidel Che Patterson. We'll use this sketch with the in J.J. we trust, Jack London said. We'll plaster these posters all over the city. Linus proceeded to give us a report on the student involvement. As he spoke, I thought how odd it was that these students preferred rioting and demonstrating to studying or propping up the bar. I'd only been gone from university a year and a half, and they'd changed a lot already. Jack thanked Linus and confirmed that we'd all meet at my place at 7:30 on Monday evening. To transport everyone to the town hall, we'd use a lorry belonging to one of the students' father, who owned 3 or 4 local companies. Remember, the young are on our side. They'll plaster posters everywhere. I've seen students scrawling Che Lives and Revolution now on at least 3 buildings in the city, said Jack. Perhaps we could involve the infants' school, I said. They could be given crayons and scrawl more sugar on our dummies now on the side of their cots and high chairs. Now, babe, don't be sarcastic, said Sheila. JJ knows what he's doing. All members will help out. And remember, do not tell a soul about this, said Jack. We must be off now, said Che Fidel. Right, well, good night, fellow artists, I said. We will bring a responsible government to the city, Che Fidel said as he shook my hand decisively and went out, clutching his case and 2 candles. We will look after all artists and children when we grab power, he said as he went into the hallway. I was tempted to hold Sheila back and tell her what I thought about her sneaky tactics in getting me mixed up with this lot. But I was so dejected that I just watched her leave with the others. What a night, I thought, dropping exhausted onto the creaky bed. God. Imagine Forbes wanting to pose like that. I looked at my drawing table and chuckled wryly at the picture that might have been. It was wrong to let those people treat him so shabbily, but under the circumstances I hadn't felt very brave. I slowly undressed, trying to put the complete train of events together in my head. After some minutes of weary thought, I turned off the light and crawled into my cold but peaceful bed. Sleep was never so welcome. Tap. Tap. I jumped up. Who's that? I gasped. It's me. I nearly tripped in my lunge for the door. I unlocked it and there stood Forbes. I left the light off and let him in. Well. You wear pajamas, he said. You came back, I said with a gulp of surprise. I still wasn't sure if he was angry. I never left, he whispered. I thought your artists' club sounded very odd. So I got dressed in the toilet, crept up the stairs and listened at the door. They might have caught you. They might have, but they made so much noise when they were about to leave, I had plenty of time to scuttle back to the bathroom to hide, but, wow. Did I get an earful? Forbes, I'm sorry they walked in like that, just when you. That's okay. I forgive you. As he spoke, he pulled his sweater over his head. I realized that, for the second time tonight, he was disrobing. Forbes, I think it's a little late to do a drawing of you now. My modeling career is over, at least for tonight. But my political activity is just beginning. Shall we see what we can negotiate? Rebel. I shall draw a veil over that night. Some things are sacred. We each said I love you. They were the days when you said I love you whether you meant it or not. You sort of felt it was expected of you. Like a man taking off his hat when a lady entered a lift. But I know I was convinced that I was in love. Chapter 18. When the sun came up next morning, bombarding my bed with blinding white shafts, my eyes opened and my mind leaped into alertness so fast that my head ached. Forbes lay turned away from me, his hair inches from my face. We had found the best use of space required. For a moment I wondered what my mother would think of this. What a dirty trick to play on her, going to bed with a man before I was married. She deserved better. I spotted my nightdress strewn over the drawing board. I thought, how symbolic it was of the middle-class morality I had shed in the past few days. Strange world it was where a girl could go for so long looking forward to the culmination of a laborious courtship, the wedding day, when she could finally sleep with her boyfriend, a day that it seemed would never dawn, and then suddenly wind up in bed with her dream man. A man thought to be totally unattainable, without any preliminary fuss. Everything had happened far too swiftly. With virtually no chance to prepare myself, there I was in bed with Bill Forbes, and never had I had even an inkling of how demanding such an event could be. My experienced friends had always made the seduction sound like the difficult part, but I found out, through trial and error, that the real operation began after you were in bed. Oh, I had heard jokes and read the racy novels of the period, but things just didn't go as smoothly as they always suggested. Nevertheless, though Forbes didn't seem completely new to this business, he did exercise wonderful patience, and in his way, he prevented me from feeling that this was my first test. Part of Forbes's back was exposed. As I drew the blanket up to cover it, I wondered fleetingly about TW, but I didn't worry. I was a rebel now. I tucked the sheet in around Forbes's neck. "Thank you," he said. "You're awake. Who could sleep with that searchlight blasting down on us?" He turned over to face me. "Good morning," he said. "Morning." I touched his hip. "Ow, your hands are cold." "Poor hands, more like poor circulation, Forbes. You're still here, you can't let me go. I might tell the press about a certain bunch of rebels." He moved closer, radiating the warmth of a small inferno. Cold hands or not, I put my arms around him. It was exciting to hold him in the stark roaring daylight. The sun picked out all the little impurities of his face and made him that much more real to me, and well, I have to say, a lot more sensual. This beautiful young man became infinitely more beautiful as he grew passionate, and it was an added treat to be able to see the change happening in broad daylight. Something about his eyes softened, his eyebrows arched a little, his mouth became more moist. I can tell you I was pretty tense that morning, telling myself that I had to do better, despite all Forbes's comforting comments. "It's okay, babe, take it easy, it'll be fine." There was a horrible moment when I thought all was lost, that the idea of being there with him was too much for me. But, wonder of wonders, as our morning bodies slowly closed in on one another, when I murmured in his ear, "Your old beard feels so nice now," and caressed him, I took over. I tell you, I shrugged off that inhibiting niceness I'd carried like a cocoon for all those years and flexed my wings with confidence. I became aggressive, let me tell you, all you out there, I turned into a tigress, a winner, the rising star. In fact, I was potentially vice-chancellor of the art college, and when my bed partner moved and flung his arms around my neck and closed his eyes, I knew I was the happiest, healthiest, most successful young woman in the whole of the Western world. Spent, tangled, together, bedclothes interwoven with our limbs like vines, we eventually had to get untangled. I lay back with my hands behind my head. Forbes leaned on one elbow at my side, a perfect profile nuzzling my shoulder. I expect you are wondering what I'm doing here, he said. It never crossed my mind. I know you've been thinking about it. And I have to tell you it's all your fault. How? You decided to do what you always wanted to do and you did it, even though it was unconventional. I'll bet you upset some people in the process. I nodded. Parents, boyfriend. Yes. I told you I liked anyone who had the guts to declare their freedom that way. What made it more important to me was knowing you in the first place. I'd always liked your drawings at university, but you were always knuckling under to people. I really was glad to see you breaking out on your own. When we met the other night, you looked pretty forlorn, and I wanted you to make good. It occurred to me that I might be able to help, and in the process, give my own mundane life a novel twist. What did you tell TW? I asked him. I told her I was going into seclusion for the weekend to work on a piece for a newspaper. That sounds phony. I know, and she probably assumes I'm up to something. At this moment, I don't care. Is that terrible? No. I said. Good, we agree. Tell me, he said, is this rebellion business actually going ahead? Were those men really serious last night? The idea is so far-fetched. Yes, they're serious. Let's not talk about it. Saturday zoomed past. We lolled around the garret most of the morning and I worked on the J.J. Patterson poster that afternoon, while Forbes concentrated on his newspaper piece. About 3:30, I came up with the bright idea of having Forbes pose as Tarzan of the Apes. I'd go out and buy some leopard skin material. I knew which shop had exactly the stuff I wanted. On the way back, I stopped at the cafe for 2 hamburgers to take away. I asked the girl in the cafe if she'd seen Jack London. She told me she thought he'd gone somewhere with 2 men named Linus and Pete. Probably a strategy meeting, I thought, and a part of me was insulted at not being invited. I did feel relieved, though, knowing Jack London was out of the house. Whether or nor he returned that night, I don't know. My hands, and bed, were so full, that I heard none of the usual night noises. Especially for Forbes, I made my first attempt at cooking a decent Sunday breakfast, while he worked on his article, The Topic Chess and the Working Man, a Marxist View. I busily boiled water, toasted bread, and poached eggs. Forbes laughed when his teeth crunched the pieces of shell that clung to his egg, but we agreed it was a good first effort. Following coffee, we got right down to business. I'd sewed a costume based roughly on a picture in my old Tarzan comic book. Imperfect as the costume was, Forbes looked terrific in it. But I couldn't decide how to pose him. I tried him in several poses, even one of him holding 2 pillows in a half Nelson as if they were a lion's head, but nothing worked. He called for a break, and as he got up to go and brush his teeth, I called, "Hold that." He froze, looking great as Tarzan with toothbrush and toothpaste in his hands. I drew him that way. The drawing took up most of Sunday, and by the time we had put the finishing touches to his article, he said he had to leave. I tried to coax him into staying until Monday, but he explained that TW was expecting him. Hey, Forbes, don't you think it's strange that a girl like me could go so long, looking forward to the culmination of a laborious courtship, the wedding day, when a girl can finally sleep with her boyfriend, a day I thought would never dawn, and then suddenly here I am, in bed with you. Why strange, said Forbes. Did you think I was unobtainable? I told him that was a very egotistical thing to say. I don't mean it to be, but it's been without fuss, no dates, no meeting parents, no engagement, no wedding. But, am I prepared emotionally or intellectually? I said. Did you find last night difficult? He said. I didn't, no. Good, tell me, is this rebellion business actually going ahead? Were they really serious last night? The idea is a bit far-fetched. Don't get too involved. I'll just give them their posters, and stay out of it, I said. If they let you. When am I going to see you again? I asked. I don't know, I have to do some serious thinking. I have to see you, especially after this Monday night thing is over. Let's see what happens, shall we? I felt I was saying goodbye to a soldier who was boarding his troop ship, only it was me that was going into the battle. I must get back, Forbes said. Yes. We clung to each other, but only for a few seconds. Forbes didn't believe in lingering. See you later. Chapter 19. I tried not to feel sorry for myself. I grabbed the poster and headed for Jack London's room, hoping he'd be home by now. He wasn't, so I went to my room to doodle and wait for him. I tried to visualize Forbes in the room, but I had a difficult time recalling exactly how he looked. I checked my drawing. It was a poor version of him, too cartoon-like, and I tried to improve it, make it more clearly him. I grew quite frantic. My pencil wouldn't do what my head commanded, and my head couldn't register a clear image of him. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Before I reached the door, it opened. Good, no boyfriend this time. Is the poster ready? Said Jack London. Here it is. Tremendous. I'll take it right away. A few can be run off tonight, we have access to a printing press. You'd better stay in. Patterson wants us to stay put until he arrives. Oh, all right, if you're nervous, perhaps Sheila could. No, no, I said, it's okay, I'll read, sketch a bit. Right. I'm off. Jack went out again, and there was nothing left for me to do but go to bed, alone. Following yet another restless night, I slept fitfully Monday morning, desperate for the rest that I needed to face the evening ahead. At noon, I got up, ruined an egg, drank 2 cups of tea, dressed and made myself a cheese sandwich. For something to do, I went downstairs to find Mr. Fogarty. He was sitting in his kitchen, staring at a drafts board. He asked me if I wanted a cup of tea, and as I didn't feel like yelling, I shook my head. I sat down across the oilcloth-covered table from him and played drafts with him. Sloppy moves cost me the game. I shrugged, and he laughed a laugh that became a cough, which sent me to his cupboard looking for the scotch. Once I was sure that he wasn't going to die there and then, I went upstairs to put on my coat. I wanted to go for a long walk. Where are you off to? Came Jack London's voice as I passed his floor. I'm going for a walk, I said, turning to see him leaning out of his room. I need some fresh air. Not chickening out, are you? Of course not. You'd better stay in. Never know if we might need some wild brilliant poster on the spur of the moment. I won't go far. JJ wants us to stay put until tonight. I think we should. Oh. All right. You're nervous. I could arrange for. No, it's all right. I'll read. Back in my garret, I couldn't read. I couldn't draw, and I couldn't sit. I paced the floor in circles and figure eights until I was dizzy and had to sit down. My stomach felt ready to reject the cheese sandwich. I opened a can of Coke and left it untouched. When everything else failed, I calmed myself by drawing a rough copy of the ghostly galleon tossing on a stormy sea. Darkness was rapidly filling in the squares of my skylight when a knock interrupted my rambling thoughts. I'd heard footsteps and was sure they belonged to a rebel. Come in, doors open. I was standing in the center of the room, completing the job of changing clothes by zipping up my skirt, when the door opened. Brian! I gasped. My first impulse was to look behind him to make sure that Jack London wasn't there. He must have heard him. Quick, come in. Babe, I'm not sure I want to come in here, I just want to. Shhhhhhhhh. I tried to grab his hand and pull him inside, but he wouldn't let me. What's the matter? He asked, in a voice that seemed to resound in the stillness like a railway station announcement. I think it must have been the panic-stricken look on my face that finally coaxed him into the room. I quickly closed the door. You mean someone might object to my being here? Brian asked. The landlord is very strict, I said. Brian stood there looking formidable in his shapeless raincoat, which ended just above his knees in a 1950s fashion. His collar was undone and his blue tie askew. His red face indicated that he had walked some distance in the cold, perhaps from the nearest bus stop. His face wore a frown, he seemed more puzzled than angry. He looked young and vulnerable, his innocence made me feel unwashed, conscious of odors in the room, dirty tights, leftover food, even the lingering scent of carnal activity. I blushed. I know there have been men up here, babe, Brian said, his voice jerky with the difficulty of the situation. Has there? I said, with a look of innocence. I didn't come here to surprise you or anything. I just wondered how you were, how it was going. Brian, it's going, well, it's going, okay. I was disappointed when you didn't phone or anything. I almost came over here the night after your darts game to congratulate you, but I suppose I expected you to call me and tell me about it, especially when I almost did telephone you. I wanted to, but I thought you'd hang up. Every night I went to sleep thinking you'd phone the next day. Even kneeling beside your mother in church, I prayed for you to call me. I thought, when in doubt, mention the church. He'll try to make me jealous next, you see. Do you know who did telephone me? Only yesterday. I knew it. No, I don't, Brian, I said. Come on, guess. I can't, I said. Come on. I didn't want to guess. Nevertheless, he told me. Sheila, your great friend. I was sure she phoned just so I'd ask her out. Brian, I said, I don't care if you ask Sheila out. I see. Do you think I care whether you care if I ask Sheila out? Do you, who didn't have the decency to talk over this move of yours with the person you're supposed to be engaged, think for one moment that I care whether you give your high and mighty permission for me to go out with Sheila? He stopped talking and gave me a challenging look. That was some speech, Brian. Did you ask her out? What business is it of yours? My voice grew shriller. Did you ask her out? No, he said. Then, what did she call you for? I asked him. She wanted to know how I was. She said she was concerned about how I was taking this whole business. She was very sweet. She said she was sure there'd be a time when you and I could sit down and talk about this whim of yours, and perhaps I could see why on earth anyone would want to give up a promising career in. Brian, I said, Sheila called you because it's part of the game. Don't you know that? What game? Brian, I'd really like to discuss life and love with you, I would, but not now. Good. Then why don't you ask me to take off my coat? Can't you at least be civil and offer me a cup of tea perhaps? Just because you live in squalor, it doesn't mean you can't be gracious. Brian, gracious as you call it, went out the window along with my past life. And would you please keep your voice down? Look, come over tomorrow and we'll chat all you want. But now, I'm afraid you're going to have to leave. Ah, he said, somebody's coming up here any minute. Is that it? Is that why you're so nervous? You're expecting that man to come back, aren't you? Where's he gone? Out for more drugs. Believe me, Brian, it'd really be best for both of us if you went home and I saw you tomorrow. If you're living in sin, babe, I'd like very much to see the lucky man. I'm going to wait here for him to come back. Brian started to pull off his overcoat. As he started to slip the coat off, I anxiously reached for it to lift it back onto his shoulders. Piss off home, Brian, this is my place, and if you don't leave in 2 seconds, I'll have you thrown out. So, it's threats now, is it? No, but this is my home and I have the right to tell you to piss off. Language, he said. He leaned against the wall. I was sitting at my desk today, he said, telling myself, as I struggled with the base rate, that I wasn't going to solve anything by constantly worrying about it. I decided I'd better come here after work and see you. His voice was subdued now, much less harsh. I called my parents and told them I was going to a film with one of the lads from the office. I told them a lie because I knew they wouldn't want me to come over here. And I had to come over here because I couldn't stand the way we'd ended everything. Perhaps I could get to understand this whim of yours. It isn't a whim. That's the whole point. All right. Okay, I'll try and understand. Brian, you have to go. Babe, if you see yourself as some kind of rebel trying to, you know what I mean, trying to rebel against. Brian, I'm not. I just want more than just. What? It's hard to put into words. It's just that painting means more to me than just. You're a dreamer, babe. You always were. Oh, I hope so, Brian, I said. I do hope so. The door crashed open. What have we here? Babe. What's this man doing here and what are you telling him? Jack London stood bare-chested, his striped t-shirt hanging from one hand. He spread his legs in combat stance. His torso glowed with the lobster coloring of someone who has just emerged from a hot bath. His face showed angry impatience. He must have been getting pretty sick of what he thought was an endless procession of applicants for the modeling job. Brian looked scared at first, mainly because of the way Jack London had burst in. In a minute or two, he seemed to have accepted him, as a denizen of this strange room dweller's world. Brian Trewin is an old friend of mine, I said. He dropped in to see me and was. He mentioned rebel twice, said Jack, his wild hair and door-blocking pose making him resemble a professional wrestler. What was that all about? He doesn't approve of my way of life here, that's all. He sees this new life of mine as a rebellion. Sure, Jack said, a wild, crazy rebellion against society. Now that you've seen her, and her little love nest, you'd better blow. Brian looked at me, then Jack London, reached for his coat but stopped short of picking it up. Just a minute, said Brian. Are you the landlord? No, I began. Yes, I am, said Jack London, and men are not allowed to visit women here after dark, so you'd better zap off, right now. Is he really the landlord? Brian asked me. He saw that I was blushing. Yes, I told him, and he's right about the rules of the house. I don't believe you, said Brian, placing a chair between himself and Jack London. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not leaving until one of you explains this. I didn't cross this whole fucking country for someone like you to. Jack, I said, let me handle this. If you could leave us alone, I think I could straighten this whole thing out. Jack thought for a moment, pulled a wristwatch from his trouser pocket, looked at it and said, I'll give you exactly 2 minutes, if he's here after that, I'm grabbing him by the balls and throwing him into the street. He slammed out of the room. Babe, this whole business is frightening, Brian said in a hushed voice. Who is that man? What power does he have over you? He told you he's the landlord. When I asked you, you said no, and he said yes, and you both acted very strangely. Really, I said. You looked as if you were afraid of what he might do, and you both kept checking the time. What's going to happen? Why do you want me out of here? Brian, this is a totally different kind of, sort of, life, that's all. This is, well, to you, I suppose it's a weird sort of life. And it's hard for you to understand. Now, you'd better. I can see you are in some kind of trouble. I've never seen you so nervous. All right, I'll go, but I'm going to get some help, a policeman perhaps, Or, no Brian. There's no need. Brian, please. He pushed me away as he threw on his coat and made for the door. It's all right, he whispered, I'll pretend to go quietly, but I'll be back with help. Brian. I grabbed his arm as he opened the door. We both froze in shock. Jack London stood there pointing a gun at us. Now, when I spoke about pursuing depravity, living in a garret and drawing naked men, going to bed with them, and perhaps meeting a few sleazy characters. Now, it was as if someone was trying to punish me for enjoying myself too much. My fortunes had taken a cruel turn. Guns belonged in films and comics, not in an artist's studio. I had never seen a real gun before. Chapter 20. Suddenly, in the stillness of a winter evening in 1968, a young man in a striped t-shirt held a pistol not 3 feet from my chest. It was pointed more or less at Brian and me, and I was terrified. For the first time, it came home to me that I was mixed up with the underworld. Get back into the room, both of you, said Jack London. Brian put his hands in the air. He couldn't believe it. Billy the Kid had entered the saloon. Holding his hands in the air, like an outlaw in a western, his face drained of all its color, Brian backed up. I retreated a couple of steps backwards. Why the gun? I said. Yes, said Brian. Are you sure you should be? Shut up, he snarled. He reminded me of Jack Elam playing the baddie in about 200 cowboy films. Yet he appeared to be as nervous as I was. He closed the door. We're all going to stay right here. I'm not going to let anything or anybody spoil tonight. I crossed this whole vast stinking country for this one great night. Sit down in that chair, mate, now. Brian did as commanded. Excuse me, said Brian. Why? Shut the fuck up, said Jack London. Jack, I have to go to the bathroom. I said. You shut up and all, babe. Everyone will be here soon and we're going to wait for them. Have you got any rope? No, I said. Why? Use a blanket then, a towel, anything. Tie that man to that chair. What? Get on with it, Jack ordered. Now wait a minute, said Brian. Couldn't we talk about this before? No. Jack London barked. We've had all the talk and discussions and conferences we can stand. The talking is all over. We are all talked out. The young people of the city are restless, and they know it's time for action. Roll the blanket up. Babe, that's right. Now put it through the arms. Oh. Wait, he'll have to take off the coat, come on, that's it. I stole daffodils from the park and threw them at the police in Scarborough, and I stole a ride in a guard's van on good old British Rail, and I stole fruit from the new supermarket in Portsmouth, and that kept me going until I reached Longleat and saw the grand dignified face of our gallant leader. J. Patterson, no, not inside the mansion, which is his rightful place, but in a photograph on the front page of the local newspaper. He was visiting the lion enclosure at the time, got into a bit of a fix with one old lioness. I got to meet him there and I followed him here. I said. Yes, I crossed our wet and windy country to be here on this day of days. Tonight I have my date with destiny and no one is going to prevent it, you hear, no one. Jack London wiped his wet mouth with his bare forearm and inspected the tying up job I'd done on Brian. I had used 2 belts to hold his ankles to the chair legs, a rolled up blanket to fix his waist to the back of the chair, and a torn sheet to tie his wrists together. He struggled a bit at first, but the gun and my gentleness made him cooperate. He looked sort of good tied to the chair that way. I was tempted to sketch him. Jack London let me sit at my table, but I was too shaky to draw. Through the skylight I could see snow beginning to fall. Jack London stood by the kitchenette, his pistol pointing at Brian and me. He was gradually winding down and there were periods of long silence. Brian wasn't gagged. Jack said he'd shoot him if he screamed out, and he must have believed him. Jack, I said, I have to go to the little girl's room. Say, Bog, babe, Let me hear you say, bog bog, I said. Say the whole thing, Jack said. I have to go to the bog. Wait until the others get here. I can't wait, Jack. I am one of you, aren't I? I said. You are not, said Brian. Shut it, you. I thought you were one of us, until you let this bloke in here. On our biggest day. Jack, I said, I'm bursting. So burst. Just then, we heard footsteps on the stairs and Jack London threw open the door. It was J.J. Patterson, dressed in an old army greatcoat, wearing a beret and a black patch over one eye. Who's he? What's he doing here? Why is he tied to that chair? He's a hostage, said Jack London. He tried to persuade Babe to betray us all. I did not, said Brian. I told you to shut it. You are a hostage now, and hostages have to keep quiet, or they get gagged, or blown away, said Jack London. Two other members of the rebel group arrived. Linus and Albert, they both carried the poster in JJ. We trust. Linus seemed to be eating sweets. Isn't this exciting, he said. Linus, I said, I am a hostage. Oh, are you? That's nice. Not you, Babe, said Jack London, not you, him. You are one of us. As J.J. Patterson moved into the garret and deposited his coat on the bed, Jack London explained to him why Brian and I were being held. I won't let anyone wreck our plans, said Jack London. I have to go badly, I said. Let us do what can be done to convince these people we never designed to wrong them, but what has been done was as much in their interest as our own, said J.J. Patterson. Isn't this exciting, said Linus. Shut up, Linus, eat your jelly babies, said Jack London. Looking flustered, but excited, Sheila arrived. Hello, Babe. Well, Brian, how are you? Tied you up, did they? Never mind. Right, when do we start? J.J. Patterson sat down beside his coat. He agreed to watch Brian, while Jack London escorted me to the second floor, where I relieved some of the pressure. Soon all the city rebels were arriving. Joe Baker came in smoking his Sherlock Holmes pipe and wearing a fedora and a fur coat. He carried a pole with a spike at the end, the kind park keepers use to pick up litter. Maurice Speed arrived wearing one of those glossy knee-length anoraks with the peaked hood and 3 stripes down one arm. As he walked, you could hear the hardware clanking in his anorak pockets. I could see one of the items hanging out, a bicycle chain. Right behind him was Tom Hines, looking like a 50s teddy boy in his double-breasted overcoat. He and Tom carried a load of J.J. Patterson posters and they nailed a couple to my wall. Sam Banks arrived wearing a woolen scarf outside his coat with one end hanging in front, the other flung around his chin and neck in the student manner. When he saw me sitting at the drawing table, he grinned, his mouth just visible over the scarf, which was frosty from his breath. Hi, Babe, he said, what's cooking? I'm a hostage, I told him. I told you, you aren't, growled Jack London. As long as you don't do or say anything stupid again, you are one of us. After all, you did the posters and you took the oath. Got your weapons? Sheila asked me. No, what should I take? Here. She gave me a long knife. I looked at Brian. He was speechless. He just shook his head. Jeff Sims came in looking back over his shoulder as if someone was following him. He looked scared. As soon as he saw Brian, he paled, but then he acknowledged J.J. Patterson by snapping to attention and saluting with the hair-trigger reflex of a zealous drill corporal. The clatter of many feet announced the arrival of the entire political science class. They thundered up the stairs like cattle in a John Ford movie. I counted 14 as they wedged their way into my garret. In their midst, wearing a beatific smile, stood the university beauty queen. Her clothes and hair were in such a state of disarray that I thought she must have been snogging with the whole class. She said hello to Brian and sat down beside J.J. Patterson without looking at me. The students worked their way into my kitchenette and every corner of the room. Some had bought their own wine and beer and were guzzling from bottles. Others carried poles, to which two of the great unwashed nailed the posters. One of them knocked the ghostly galleon tossing on a turbulent sea onto the floor, while another poured beer over Brian's head. He cried out, prompting Jack London to take a pair of rolled-up socks from my dresser and force them into his mouth. I don't know who would have heard him anyway. Mr. Marriott was very deaf, and if there were other tenants, I'd never seen them, except a bloke in a kimono, who I think was a student from the art department. In came Paul Gustav and Joe Bond. Paul was barely recognizable in a miner's helmet and army surplus clothes that would have suited an African brigade more than York winter rebels. He carried a rifle with a bayonet on the end. Joe wore a naval overcoat and a ski hat. "I'll fight to my dying breath, I won't back down to anyone in any way, shape, or form," roared Paul. "We had the devil's job finding this place," said Joe Bond. Jeff passed out a small supply of hatchets. Jack London raised his pistol in the air and shouted 3 cheers for JJ. Patterson, hooray, everyone yelled. Hip hip hooray hooray and one more hooray. Jack London punctuated the final cheer with a deafening shot right through one pane of the skylight, raining shattered glass and ice and snow onto some of the students and poor Brian. The shot alarmed some of us, but seconds later we were right back in the spirit of the occasion, talking, laughing and drinking. JJ Patterson was standing now, graciously accepting best wishes, while the beauty queen stayed seated, her eyes fixed on the hole in the skylight, watching snowflakes drop through it like ghosts, as eager student hands reached into her coat from every direction. Paul Gustav lighted a cigar and amused a few of the younger rebels by slicing smoke rings with his bayonet. People dropped ashes and spilled beer. They tracked mud over the bed and up the walls. Bottles were thrown at the skylight and 2 more panes were smashed. My garret would never be the same. Yet somehow their high spirits were infectious. By the time we were ready to leave, I was tearing down the girly calendar and coming oh so close to dousing Brian with the dregs of my beer. I tipped the bottle over his head and only the sight of his wide, unbelieving eyes prevented me from pouring. "Remember, man," Jack London said in a loud voice. Sheila interrupted. "And women," she said. "Yeah, and women, remember, our main weapon is the element of surprise. Before the city council knows what hit it, we'll be in command. When we get to the town hall, we barge in, looking wild and disorganized, and I'll draw my trusty 6-shooter on the mayor. It'll be all over before half of you are in the building. All right, men and ladies, let's go." Everyone started singing "The Times They Are A-Changing Yahoo!" the rebels yelled as they clattered down the stairs. Sheila was told to keep an eye on me and she stayed at my side as we headed out, holding the posters ahead of us like lances. Mr. Marriott stood in his living room archway, smiling and waving as if he was watching a parade. As we made our way out the front door to the lorry, I heard a bewildered voice. "Could one of you chaps tell me if Babe Live's here?" There, standing beside the broken fence with a surprised look on his weary face, was my father. Just behind him, equally amazed, was my brother. "Hey, Dad!" I called. "Move along, Babe, or Jack will shoot you," said Sheila, in a fierce voice that only I could hear. "Dad, I'm sorry I can't stop now, I'm on my way out with the lads." I was being herded along. "Bye for now, let me know when you're coming next time." Looking stunned, Dad and my brother took a few paces backward as they watched us board the open lorry. Jack London and JJ Patterson climbed into the front. It was windy and snowing hard. The engine started. A few of the gang wanted to chant something and a student suggested Old MacDonald had a farm. That's what we were singing as we pulled away. We stopped about a mile away from the town hall. Jack London leaned out of the front cab to tell us to keep quiet. Alternately grumbling and laughing, the gang of us huddled together and watched the snow settle on each other's shoulders and on Paul's mining helmet. Joe sat in a corner with a poncho around his head, He looked like a refugee. Linus and two of the others stood together with their arms around each other. I thought they might break into a Christmas carol at any minute. "Rotten night," said Sheila. The engine revved and we finally got going again. I looked up just in time to brace myself. The lorry had started off too quickly, it hit a patch of ice and rumbled toward a snowdrift. Braking didn't help. We skidded into it. "Get out! Get out!" said Jack London. "We'll have to push." We all got out and tried to push, but most of us kept slipping. The drunken ones fell. Jack London grew so anxious that he yelled, "I didn't journey across the country for this," and he ran up and down the street. One of the students went to a phone box to call for a breakdown lorry. Sheila suggested walking, but the students vetoed that. Linus tried thumbing a lift, but no one would stop for a gang of rowdies carrying knives, hatchets, and banners. Finally we phoned for taxis, but the breakdown lorry got there first and pulled our vehicle free. Jack London paid the man and announced to us that he was going to drive. "I hope we can get across Lendal Bridge," said Jeff with a worried frown. "We will have to cross that bridge when we come to it, comrade," said JJ. Patterson. "Very funny," I said. "What?" said JJ. Patterson. "Cross, bridge, joke, you made a joke," I said. "Unintentional, I assure you," said JJ. Patterson. Jack London drove like a madman. With visibility almost down to zero, he sent the lorry careering toward the town hall, flattening the snow on Lendal Bridge. We passengers were so jostled around that 3 of the students got sick. I ducked my head to rub my ears on my overcoat lapel. Most of us were freezing. I caught a glimpse of one serious-looking student, blatantly warming his hand between the beauty queen's legs. I began to feel more and more rebellious. Onward we plunged, through the snow and the traffic lights, but we stayed on the road and we missed every parked car. At last, we slowed down and I dared to look over the top of the cab. I could make out the unique profile of the town hall. This was it. One of the students, whose dad's truck it was, thanked Jack London for delivering it safely, as we all piled out. "I crossed this country for this stupendous moment," Jack London roared. "Let me at 'em," snarled Paul Gustav, dropping into a commando position. "Yahoo!" the gang cheered. "We'll hit the council in as disorderly group as we can," said Jack London. "Let's go." He and JJ Patterson lead the way. We were at the rear of the town hall. Holding my knife high, I ran ahead of the pack, up there beside the leaders. "I'm one of you," I cried. "Look, I'm one of you." New energy flooded through me. We clattered up the stone steps. Jack London opened the big door and we thundered in. I saw a little man standing in the main corridor. JJ Patterson and Jack London ignored him and ran up to the door of the council chamber, which was on the 2nd floor. "Where you lot going then?" sighed the little man. "They've all gone home, the council meeting is over, I was just about to lock up." "Hey," said Linus. "Hey, Mr. London, Mr. Patterson, they've all go off, we missed them." "That's right," said the little man, who I took to be the caretaker. "They had very little on the agenda. Most of them had a cold or the flu, so they've either gone to the pub, or home to their wives and kiddies." I followed Jack London and JJ Patterson through the doors into the council chamber. "Where are you?" yelled Jack London. "Come out of hiding, you alderman pigs." JJ Patterson said nothing, but, for the first time, he swung into action. He took his knife and carved "Che Lives" and "Viva Zapata" on the chamber door. "All right, knock it off now, boys. This little demonstration has gone far enough." The 3 of us whirled around. 3 giant policemen bore down on us. "This is not a demonstration," Jack London growled. "And it is not an insurrection neither. This is a real revolution." We fought to get away, swinging our arms around like windmills, but they had us. The rest of the rebels were nowhere to be seen. "Where is everybody?" said Jack London, struggling in the mammoth arms of the biggest cop. Our boys are rounding them up outside, said my captor. I didn't trek back and forth across this country to wind up in jail, protested Jack London. How did you know about this? We got a tip-off, said the sergeant who was holding our leader. We didn't believe it at first, another crank call, but we had a car watching just in case. Come on, now. Who called you, who? Asked Jack London. He continued to struggle, but JJ and I went peacefully. It does not matter, said JJ Patterson with dignity, as snow melted and ran down his nose. My work is done. When we got outside, a whole fleet of police cars were pulling away with rebels inside looking sheepish and sad. As the policeman packed the three of us into a waiting Black Maria, one cop frowned at me. Just a minute, he said, standing in front of me. Haven't I seen you somewhere before? I doubt it, I said. I wanted to be a famous artist, but I never got started. I know where it was, he said. Aren't you the little girl who won the darts trophy at the pub last week? I'm not so little, but yes, it was me, I said, modestly. Can I have your autograph, he said. Chapter 21. I wondered if poets were the only artists to produce great work in prison. Perhaps if I got a long enough sentence I'd produce something worthwhile. You've got to go to the house first, I told the driver as the car headed for the police station. Which house? The policeman beside me asked. Don't tell him, said Jack London. My house, I said. I mean, the house where I live, my studio. Don't listen to her, Jack London snarled. She just wants to see her mummy. It's my boyfriend, I said. He's tied and gagged on the top floor. Where? Asked the policeman that was holding Jack London. I blurted out the address. Traitor! Jack London roared. We'll send a car around there later, said the driver. Now we have to get you lot into the cells. Reclining in my police cell, I thought how nice it was to be warm as I listened to a bearded old inmate along the corridor sing Danny Boy. On Tuesday morning, I was visited by a lawyer, one I wasn't very thrilled to see. Well, he said, here she is, public enemy number one. Disc jockeying not work out then? I wasn't, never mind. I wanted to be an artist painting, you know, I said. Nice little cell you have here. Your artistic career has certainly taken you a long way from home, Mr. Hayes. I said. That's it? Your dad talked me into giving you that job, remember? I've come to represent you, he said. I need that, do I? Well, it's not exactly Bonnie and Clyde, but you do, yes. I see, I said. Smashing up the town hall is the sort of behavior we should expect from a budding artist, I suppose. Funny that we heard nothing about it on the BBC. Ha! Ha! Mind you, it is an ugly building. You ought to have done the job properly, and burned it down. Might earn you the gratitude of the local citizenry. Sorry, I said, I'm not in the mood for comedy. I've got a headache from all the excitement. Did they find Brian? He was tied up and gagged, in the attic. Not to worry. He was released. Said you were forced to join the gang at gunpoint. Were you? Sort of, I told him. Yes, well. The caretaker told us you seemed rather reluctant to join in the vandalism. So, when do I get out? No, so fast, young woman. They'll let you out. But only if I make you promise to move back with your parents. Mind you, I can't take you back into the firm. Wouldn't do to have a criminal under our roof, would it? Ha! Ha! No, I said, I suppose not. What about the others? Will they be charged? Shouldn't think so. It was a bit of excitement on a dull evening. Leaving jail in the company of Mr. Hayes was anything but the happiest of events. The last person I wanted a kindness from was my ex-boss. He kept up a steady patter while he drove me over to Mr. Marriott's. I wanted him to leave me there, but he insisted he could only vouch for me if I went home. He said he'd help me pack. I agreed, mainly because I thought I could always move back after the fuss had died down, though I didn't tell Mr. Hayes that. In the end, it was a good idea to have him with me. He was so incongruous in the garret surroundings that all my fond memories were obliterated. That room looked like a battered and abandoned greenhouse. Besides the mess the rebels had made and the remnants of Brian's bondage, there was melting snow over everything. It had come in through the broken skylight. I shoved my soggy drawing paper into my suitcase. On the way out, I called goodbye to Mr. Marriott. I found him in his kitchen, examining a Scotch label with a magnifying glass, and I was in Mr. Hayes' Singer Vogue estate with all my stuff in the boot when I remembered something. "Just a minute," I said. I ran back upstairs and went straight to the kitchenette. I reached behind the old fridge and from the greasy dirt and cobwebs I pulled out my trophy. It had survived the rebellion. "What is that?" said Mr. Hayes. "It's my Oscar," I answered. "I won it for my dazzling performance as an anarchist artist." My Hayes didn't laugh. Chapter 22. You could say that was the end of my artistic career. I think of it now all these years later, as if it were a dream. No wild bunch me. I Kerouacked my way home. Never to be on the road or a Dharma bum. But I have to think of it as a real adventure, the kind you can brag about when you are old and grey. Back to my parents' house I went and, in a day or two, it seemed as if I'd never left. They put no pressure on me to go out and get another job because they were happy to have me back. "She's come to her senses," I heard my mother say. I sat on my bed and just stared at the wall. Occasionally I looked at a newspaper, and one day I read that both Jack London and J.J. Patterson were sent to an open prison for 3 months, while the rest of the rebels were set free. I sometimes thought that Jack London might come looking for me when he got out, but he never did. According to Linus, J.J. Patterson and Jack London were on their way to America to start an independent record company. One night in the Transport Cafe, Linus said they didn't see Sheila anymore. The mention of her name made me angry. A few nights later, I drank a few glasses of wine and that made me belligerent and I phoned Sheila. "It was all your fault, I got mixed up with J.J. Patterson," I told her. "I'm coming over there to pull all your hair out." "Piss off," Sheila said. "Sheila," I said, "you were never very good at cursing. Swear words lose their punch when you say them." I slammed down the telephone. Later, I heard Sheila took a teacher training course, and teaches infants in Wigan, which might account for the attitude of so many kids these days. I like to think that my brush with the rebels made me more aggressive. I jumped out of bed one morning and informed my parents that I was off into town, and that I wouldn't be back until I'd found a job. After a brisk walk along Monkgate, feeling I belonged among all the young women in a hurry, I marched into the labor exchange, determined to fight my way back up the legal ladder. They told me there was a vacancy at a new firm called Frystad, Campbell and Dench. They phoned to make an appointment for me with the office manager, Miss Griffiths. I like to think that it was my newfound aggressiveness that impressed Miss Griffiths and led her to offer me a trainee position. I don't know what happened to my new aggressiveness when it came to Bill Forbes. On the other hand, hadn't he shown a reasonable amount of affection for me? But what about Brian? More guilt. One night, when I could stand inactivity no longer, I walked past Forbes's house. When after minutes of soul-searching, I thought better of it, I found a phone box and dialed Forbes's number. A man's voice. Was it Forbes? I was sure it was. I hung up without saying a word. Well, you know how you can put things off. There never seemed to be another appropriate moment. And why didn't he phone me? With characteristic masochism, I started watching the wedding announcements in our local paper, and yes. Sure enough, with spring came this: Mr. and Mrs. James Wood are pleased to announce the engagement of their daughter, Tina Wood, to Mr. William Forbes, only son of Mr. and Mrs. Conrad Forbes. The wedding will take place at 2:30 p.m. on the 1st of May at St. Cuthbert Church. How could he? What could he see in her? Why hadn't he given me a chance? Should I call TW and tell her all about Forbes and me? Perhaps I'd send her the sketch I'd done of her beloved as a wedding present. I didn't. I sent an electric kettle. For over 2 months I didn't phone Brian, and he didn't phone me. But after seeing him looking at me over his prayer book in church one Sunday, I thought I did owe him something. After all, he was generous and considerate. So, I phoned him and asked if he'd like to go to the flicks. He said he'd love to. After the film he took my hand. "You will be a virgin when we get married, babe. You know how my mother and I feel about you wearing white at your not, you know, intact." I said. "All right. Babe," he said, "I'm glad you've had some experience." "I really am. I think it's important that, well, one of us has, but you know how I feel about wearing white if you're not." "Brian," I said, "do you mean, you've never?" Well, once anyone I know." I asked him. "I don't think I should tell you. Come on, Brian, you know all about me and Forbes, you mean? Don't you?" "Yes," I said. "Who was it?" "Sheila," he said. "What? When?" "That night. She came back, untied me, and, well, talking, it sort of got, you know." "Yes, Brian," I said, "I know, Sheila, the good time that was had by all." We both laughed. What could I do? We made wedding plans. 3 months later we were married. The agreement that we wanted marriage overrode whatever disappointment we had, and this would be the nature of the compromise for the rest of our lives. And in time, when desire had waned, time would soften our disappointment as it would harden our arteries and make brittle our hair and nails and bones. A marriage? Of course, a happy one? Well, why not within its limits? An idyllic marriage? Not likely, but then so many weren't, and the lies of the wedding anniversaries were small ones in the face of the overwhelming reality of lives lived together for so many years. Longevity brought its own excuses, its own blurring sentiments, its own sensible effacement of past disappointments. Time did not merely heal wounds, it shrank them to points of invisibility, and age washed out the taste for recalling them. I did wear white, my parents insisted. Later, the local newspaper asked me to write a column on painting tips. It ran for a year, complete with sketches, how to mix paints, hold the brush, that sort of thing. I think it helped some people, though Brian claims his workmates found my column humorous, rather than helpful. I had hoped my daughter would be the serious artist in the family, but Brian has her spending all her time ballroom dancing, preparing her for competition. I still paint, but only at weekends, and mainly to amuse the children. And Brian made me promise never to tell them about the garret and my time as an artist and rebel. He says it might give them ideas. There is a tyranny of good intentions, and it is its very benevolence which makes rebellion impossible compromise. Indeed, but how far? How much? For how long? No one wants to be left out in the cold. It's cold out there, so cold that you have to run off and find some other warmth, the comfort of belonging to a society, even one composed of people like Brian. I think God should have given us 2 lives, one to gain experience, and the other to put the experience to use, but the consequences would have probably baffled him. The end.